Legends and Losers is brought to you by our friends at Oracle NetSuite. Learn how to grow your business right now at netsuite.com/legends. On this episode, all things Ramones, what it's like to be a music industry entrepreneur, and how Dave Frey became the luckiest guy in the world. All right. And as the Ramones said, hey ho, let's go. And man, are we going to go? And are we going to talk about the Ramones? Hello, my legendary friends. This is Christopher Lochhead. And I couldn't be more excited to share Dave Frey with you. Now, our guest today is a music industry entrepreneur, a musician himself. He is a festival creator. He's the creator of the Lockn Festival. And I'll give you the full lowdown on Dave. But suffice it to say, Dave is one of the co-managers of the Ramones legacy. And so we're going to unpack everything about the greatest rock band ever. And of course, the band that was the category designers of punk rock. Now, right off the top, I have to say thank you to my buddy and one of our listeners, Kim Bolin. I can't remember exactly how Kim got connected to Legends and Losers. She'll probably remind me. But a while back, we were trading some email or some text, or I can't remember which. And she shared with me that she has a buddy named Dave Frey who co-manages the Ramones. And maybe he needed to come on Legends and Losers. So I want to thank you very much, Kim, from the bottom of my heart for connecting me to this amazing guy. The other thing I love about Kim, when she first connected with me, she shared how, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it was her brother, she fell in love with Legends and Losers in the beginning, and she gave Legends and Losers to her brother as a, if I remember right, a birthday present. And so I love that idea. And so I would encourage you, if you wake up tomorrow morning and you realize that it's your spouse's birthday and you think, oh shit, I didn't get him anything, which, happens to me. Don't forget, you can give them Legends and Losers. In the old days, we used to give people box sets of CDs or whatever. If you were ever into motivational tapes, you had those plastic things with all the tapes in them that you stick in your car. So just give somebody Legends and Losers. It's an awesome last minute gift, and it won't cost you anything. So anyway, all that said, thank you so much, Kim. Love you for introducing us to Dave and for giving Legends and Losers to your brother and others as a gift. Now, if you're new to Legends and Losers, we aspire to have authentic, real conversations about what it takes to design a legendary business and a legendary life. We try to hack the best minds in Silicon Valley and beyond, and we try to do it in a real way, a no bullshit way. Now, you probably heard off the top, NetSuite is our founding sponsor, the good folks at Oracle, or NetSuite by Oracle. Last year, I was lucky enough to do a speaking tour with them, and we traveled around the U.S. and went up to Toronto, Canada, talking about category design and all the good stuff, signing copies of Play Bigger, and we had a great time on tour. And so the folks at NetSuite sort of showed back up and said, hey, we'd love to sponsor Legends and Losers. And their mission is really deeply aligned with ours. As you know, we are at the lowest level of recorded entrepreneurship in the United States right now. And I believe that entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial people are the kinds of individuals who build our world. Over half Americans work for a small entrepreneurial business. Virtually all the new job growth, when you look at the data, comes from startups and smaller entrepreneurial companies. And we're in an era where it's never been easier to be an entrepreneur. And so NetSuite has the same mission that we have in a lot of ways, which is to empower entrepreneurship and to support existing entrepreneurs in growing. So they're the perfect first sponsor for us. It wouldn't have made sense if our first sponsor was a shower ring company, a shower curtain ring company, if you remember trains, planes, and automobiles. NetSuite offers a cloud business platform for managing every aspect of your business, giving you real-time visibility into all the stuff that matters. It's your one source of truth for revenue, expenses, cash, orders, and even HR. NetSuite is now part of Oracle, one of the largest technology companies on the planet. So they bring a tremendous amount of technology and research to bear. And the other cool thing, as part of our relationship with NetSuite, is they're going to be using some Legends and Losers content in their thought leadership around things that they're trying to bring to the table to help companies grow. Now, NetSuite is offering Legends and Losers listeners a really cool opportunity to get a 60-minute free business review with a growth expert on how to turbocharge your growth, how to look at areas that maybe you haven't, or how to think about things in a new way. And so to get your free growth review, go to legendsandlosers.com. No, not legendsandlosers.com. Go to netsuite.com. If you want a growth review at legendsandlosers.com, you can just check out some of our episodes. Go to netsuite.com/legends. And what you'll be able to do there is set up a time for an industry expert in your area, in your category, to have a hour-long conversation with you about how to turbocharge growth. netsuite.com/legends, netsuite.com/legends. All right, Dave Frey. Man, I just was so stoked to have this conversation. He co-manages the Ramones. He's the founder of this giant music festival in Arlington, Virginia called the Lockn Music Festival. And Lockn, as well as Dave, he has a particular affinity for jam bands. So some of the big names that have been at Lockn have been the bigger jam bands. This year, 2018, Lockn will take place on August 23rd through the 26th. And a few of the big names will be Widespread Panic, the incredible Dead and Company, as well as George Clinton and many others. For information on the Lockn Festival, check out Lockn, L-O-C-K-N, Festival, all one word, locknfestival.com. Now, Dave used to manage Cheap Trick. Didn't I see you crying? One of the great bands. I saw Cheap Trick live at a John Barbrado's store in the Hard Rock Hotel in Las Vegas a couple of years ago. And man, oh man, was it ever awesome to see them in that kind of an environment. So Dave used to manage the Cheap Trick folks, and another one of the cool bands, Blues Traveler. He's booked more acts than you can think of, including Robert Plant, Tom Petty, Willie Nelson, John Fogerty, Fish, Jefferson Airplane, Steve Earle, My Morning Jacket, and one of my favorites, Peter Wolf, the former lead singer of the Jay Giles Band. Remember, na 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 na, my angel is a centerfold. That's Jay Giles Band. Anyway, Dave co-founded the Horde Festival with John Popper in 1992. He's also known for being really the guy that united Widespread Panic, Blues Traveler, Spin Doctors, Fish, and others under the banner of a touring festival, which is a very cool concept that he helped to pioneer. And we have a great conversation about how do you design your life around something you truly love, in his case, music. And here he is, the legendary Dave Frey. So, you know, as I read about your life and sort of look at your history and look at your present and all the things that you do, it occurs to me, like, you kind of look like you're having a dream life, Dave. Is that how it feels for you?
Yeah, I feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world. So it hasn't been without a lot of, failure and learning curves, so to speak.
So it's true that you can't be a legend unless you've done some losing along the way.
Well, I always, I think it's called, depends how you look at the losers part of it. But if you learn from losing, then you're a winner. Then you can win. And you don't really succeed at it. I don't think it much unless you put the time in, and the time requires, what is it, 10,000 hours or something?
Yeah,
or some book said that, I think.
That's what Malcolm Gladwell wants us all to believe, right? Anyway. But exactly.
But, and if you can put in 10,000 hours or whatever it takes and always win, then it's just not reality. So
yeah.
You have to, you have to lose, and you have to learn from your mistakes when you do it.
And so, I want to go to that, but I'm exploding to ask you this question, so I just got to. How did you meet the Ramones?
Long story. I was working in New York at the New Music Seminar, which was a convention. It was a music convention in New York in the mid '80s to mid 1900s, 1990s. That was just huge. It had over 20,000 registrants, at its height, internationally, and all the bands from around the world would come to New York and showcase, because all the labels would come in, all the publishers would come in, all the agents would come in. Everybody worldwide was there. The Australians.
So these were bands that weren't signed, Dave?
Yeah, pretty much. Bands that were and weren't, but bands that were on the way up, primarily. Even bands that did have record deals would want to showcase. If you had, let's say you were the Hoodoo Gurus coming in from Australia on big time records, you'd want to come in and play, be one of the 6 bands playing at the Ritz that night, so that you could try to secure a U.S. deal or a deal for Europe or, other territories like that, because it had just such a huge international following. The people that ran it were really smart, and they got a lot of people in from around the world. So anyway, I was able to get a job booking shows for New Music Seminar. And one of the shows that I was kind of handed initially was the Joey Ramone New Music Night Show. I booked them a long time ago in Chicago at a upstairs club called Tuts. That later became Avalon, and is right next to the Vic Theater at Sheffield and Belmont. But I didn't really meet them or hang with them or anything. I said hi, but that was, so Joey had this New York New Music Night show, and it was just a mystery to everybody what it was. So I called Arturo.
Was it a mystery to Joey too?
It kind of ended up being that way, but I called Arturo, and he was like, "This is a big pain in the ass. I'm busy. I really don't have a lot of time to deal with this." And then I called Monty and talked to him about it, and kind of got the same response. And so finally, Monty said, "Why don't you? I'll just have Joey call you. We got a lot of the logistics worked out, but we couldn't figure out what bands were playing or what do we put in the ad, So I called Joey, and we started talking, and he's like, "This is kind of a mess. Maybe can you stop by?" And I was like, "Sure." So I went to his apartment, and that was kind of, just this kind of like a science experiment of how many things you can balance on a flat surface without them falling over, including the floor. And there were paths, that you could tell, like when you walked in, there was all this money on the floor. So he probably had this thing where he would come in and he'd just take the money out of his pants and throw it on the floor. And then,
So wait a minute. I want to make sure I understand exactly. So there were pathways through the apartment?
Yes. And there were just...
Was there shit piled up?
Yeah. Yeah. Like suitcases and clothes and boxes of stuff with, like merchandise and stuff, and just stuff, it was just
packed. But band stuff, Ramone stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It was all, and then just records and tapes and, cassettes and everything everywhere, kind of in this monster stereo, of course, and big couch. And was it organized or was it chaotic? No, it was organized. So you could tell he had a system.
Okay, so it wasn't like he just threw shit around.
No. It was organized. So there was a method to it.
But it was trippy, it sounds like.
It was, yeah, and it was a little unique. So we sat down and he started going through, and it was basically, I'll paraphrase a lot, but it was basically like he said, I told Handsome Dick and, Manitoba's Wild Kingdom that they could headline and get half the money. And then I told Dee Dee he could headline and get half the money. And then I told the Lunatics they could headline and get half the money. And I Blitzbeer, they could, they could headline and get half the money, and there's like 9 bands or something. And I'm like, all right, well, let me try to figure it out. I know I'll let you know. And he's like, thanks a lot. And, and he really wanted tacos from the little taco shop on 2nd Avenue and 8th Street. So I went, I went and I called all the bands, and everybody was pretty cool with it. It wasn't, there wasn't really an issue, to call, Dick and say, listen, we've got like $100 and you're going to play from 8:15 to 8:45. And, we've kind of shoehorned all the 9 bands in there, and maybe it wasn't 9, it might've been 7 or 8, but it was more than the 3 that we would normally have. And then I went to the taco shop a little later on, and they were like, we don't do that. We're too busy. We can't bring tacos to a show over there. So I never did tell Joey this, but I went to the taco shop with like $200, bought $200 worth of tacos, ran them back, put them on the table. People bought them. We ran back and got more. We kind of had this thing going back and forth with the taco.
So Joey didn't know that the taco guys actually didn't play. You just made it work anyway.
Yeah, they didn't want to, be a part of it. So we just bought tacos and said they were a part of it. Anyway, so it went well. He was happy. I know that there was some kind of issue with Joey and Dee Dee later on. I'm not sure what it was, but anyway, that's when I first really started talking to him, and I did
And remind me again, Dave, what year was that?
It was 88. It might have been 87.
Okay, 87. So I mean, they're well into their careers at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excuse me. But yes, they were.
What year do you remember? What year their first record came out?
Well, their very first record came out in 1976.
Yeah, I was going to guess 77. So they were 10 years in, roughly.
Yes.
Yep. And they were the Ramones by then, for sure, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They were still, that was kind of like at the end of the Ritchie period, about near the return of Mark.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so anyway.
It was almost Spinal Tapian, the band member rolling in and out and names and so forth, right? Or is that unfair?
I don't think so. It never felt that way as a fan.
Oh, it didn't?
No, because I would go to see a lot of shows. It was kind of like, there was Joey, Johnny, and Dee Dee. It didn't really feel different to me until CJ came in, because they were online. The drummer's up there behind the drums. It's they're flailing away. You don't really know. It's. I guess I never saw the band with Tommy, so I don't know. I mean, to me, the Tommy story is just so great. That he was their manager, and that that they chose him to be the manager because he worked at Electric Lady Studio, and he could get them time in the studio at downtime, and they wouldn't have to pay for it. And he knew people that could help get a tape deal going, and he was there during recordings when like Hendrix was there and that type of thing, which was pretty cool to have a guy like that in your sphere, And he was from the neighborhood, so he agreed to manage them, and the first thing he did was come to the practices and determine pretty much it. Joey had some some issues with keeping organized all the time. He had OCD issues, and so Tommy was able to recognize that Joey wasn't the best person to have as drummer because he'd spend more time in between songs resetting the drums and making them perfect than he would playing the song. So there'd be these massive breaks. And
who was singing before Joey?
Dee Dee.
Dee Dee was.
Yeah, so Dee Dee couldn't sing and play bass. He could sing, but
because his solo stuff sounds great.
Yeah, well, later on he became much better at singing while he played.
Yeah,
in my opinion. But
it's interesting because Duff from Guns N' Roses in his solo band plays rhythm guitar. He says the same thing. When he's singing lead vocal, it's really hard for him to play bass.
Yep. Yeah, it's challenging. It's like patting your head and rubbing your tummy or something,
So that makes guys like Geddy Lee and Sting even more impressive, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. That they can just do it instinctively somehow.
Yeah.
And Dee Dee became that way, but when they were first starting out, Tommy didn't feel that he could do both at the same time professionally. So Tommy decided, and they agreed, that Joey would be the lead singer, as he had been, because he was in a band called Striper before that was a more of a glam band out on the island. And so that Joey stepped up to the mic and Dee Dee stepped back to backup vocals and playing bass, and they started auditioning drummers, and they found a few, and they just couldn't find anybody that was the right drummer. So for a few rehearsals, Tommy sat in just to keep the beat, having never played drums in his life. And then they had this gig coming up, and they didn't find the drummer in time. So Tommy was just going to sit in and fill in, and so that's what it was. So like maybe the sixth time he's ever played drums in his life, he's playing live with the Ramones, which he had that pretty much that one beat, like that. That was it, right? So and so
but fast, right?
Yeah, to me that's just amazing, and that he had such a he just was able to fall into it like that, and be and people are like, oh, he created this sound and how the drums are, just in lockstep like that. No. He never. It just happened. There was no real forethought to it, other than that they were just going to be stripped down and kind of maybe reactive to some of the other. As a lot of people have said, that they were, the scene at the time was, Led Zeppelin and 20-minute guitar solos, and nothing against that stuff, but that they were kind of like, we're just going to play, the verses and the choruses, and that's it, and what Monty told me something that the very first show at the Performance Center in New York was like 17 minutes long, and they were done, and the club owner's like, what are you doing? You're contracted for an hour. So they just went back up and played the same thing two more times. And people were just kind of like, what is this? Like there were maybe 10 or 20 people there just kind of, what?
Because all the songs are 2 minutes, right?
Right, but maybe not even realizing that they were the same songs again and again. And then after that, Tommy left, and he went on to produce my favorite Replacements record ever, Tim, and work with Talking Heads.
What a great underrated band, the Replacements.
And what a great underrated producer, Tommy Ramone.
Yeah.
At Zardelli. And then later in life, he was so happy with Claudia, and that's when I really got to know him. But doing the Uncle Monk stuff, and it was so eclipsed by Ramones at the time. But he kind of did the same thing he did with Ramones. He picked up a mandolin. He didn't know how to tune it, so he tuned it the way it sounded right to him. He didn't know how to, he never took a lesson or anything. And he just started writing songs on mandolin and playing them with Claudia accompanying him on guitar. And she's super introverted. She never says a word. She's like, Teller and Penn and Teller maybe a little bit, So it was just like this real, wow, this is super different, like Bill Monroe on acid type of stuff, And it was, I thought it was great, but, they would go play shows and all these kids would show up with the mohawks, waiting to hear Blitzkrieg Bop or something because it was Tommy. So and they'd be
and then he pulled out a mandolin.
Right. Well, yeah, and they were fine with anything he did, but they were really hoping he'd, redo a Ramones song, which he never did. But I always told him he should have given them that, at one point or another. But
Beat on the Brat through a mandolin would have been great.
Unbelievable. But those kids would be there right with the do-si-doers, kind of they'd be playing like Charleston, West Virginia, or places like that on that circuit doing that stuff, and it was really cool, and nobody knows about it pretty much, but You can still go to unclemonk.com and get Tommy's music, but
you know what I'm reminded of as you tell these. What I'm reminded of, Dave, as you tell these Tommy stories. Do you ever remember Jack White saying, and I'll paraphrase it, but he said something to the effect of, the White Stripes really changed when he and Meg learned how to play their instruments. He thought the band was better when they didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
Because of that beginner's mind.
That's right.
Is that what he had?
I think so. Yeah, it was this innocence to it that, was just true and pure. And, I got the chance to talk to John Grisham, who I live in Charlottesville here, and he's a native of Charlottesville also. I got to meet him and talk to him a little bit just about writing, right? And he was saying in general that, like, songwriters tend to write their best stuff at the beginning when they don't know what they're doing, because or even the Ramones. Joey was trying to play an Alice Cooper song, right? He was trying to learn an Alice Cooper song for real when he's starting out, and it just didn't quite work. So he just started singing "I Don't Care" over it, and it became "I Don't Care."
Right.
He couldn't play straight if he tried. It just wasn't ever in the cards. So, and then, but what John said was that that bands in music people tend to write their best stuff on their first 3 to 5 records. That's their iconic canon of stuff. And if they can get all that out in the first 5 years, somehow get out 4 or 5 records, then that becomes what, is the core stuff that really gives them their personality. Because once they learn the tricks of the trade, and you go verse, chorus, break, verse, chorus, or whatever your formula is. Once that happens, it's you're kind of you lose your feel for it. It's not you lose the innocence in that, and normally you've had some kind of success, so you're not as hungry. Where with book writers, it's the opposite. The more books you write, the more you learn how to capture people's prose and dialogue and that type of thing. So they're different disciplines. But
and so John's theory was book writers get better and songwriters get worse.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. The other thing, maybe did you talk about this with him? If you think about it from a music point of view, maybe it's true with writers too. But how many of them it happens at a young age, if not strikingly young age.
Yes. Not so much with writers.
Yeah, because you don't see legendary prose coming out of 17-year-old book writers.
Often not.
But look at Adele, right?
Yeah.
Holy shit. Amazing. Blew everybody's minds, right?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, and her music isn't necessarily my kind of music, although I don't even know that it has a genre, but she blew me away, wow, you don't get a lot of these.
That's really true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And then so to your point on the age, how she's 17, 18, 19 when those things are happening, when she's blowing all our minds. And then the other one, I don't know if you had this experience. Was it last year, Lady Gaga? Was it the Super Bowl?
Yeah, it was two or 3 years ago.
Okay. Well, but remember she jumped off the top of the building?
Yeah.
And, after I watched the whole thing, I Googled her because I was curious to see how old she was. And at the time, she was 30. And I turned to my wife, Carrie, Dave, and I said, she's Holly, our niece. She's Holly. 30 is a relatively young person.
Absolutely.
And so here's this 30-year-old woman doing all these mind-blowing things. And so, it's an interesting, Grisham's point is an interesting thing because it seems to be the case a lot in music. You would know way better than I would, of course.
Yeah, not really. It's just an observation, I think. But, most bands, if you go to the AC/DC catalog with their 23 records, chances are you're going to pull out one of the first 5. if you go to the Ramones catalog with their 14 records, chances are you're going to pull out one of the first 5. Same with Aerosmith or,
Van Halen or Led Zeppelin or
Neil Diamond or, you name it. Any, Barbra Streisand, anybody that's got a career that can, sell arenas or whatever, they usually have those, 3, 4, or 5 records that they put out and like bang, 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 bang in the first 5 years of their career.
By the time, and this is probably going to be unfair, but by the time they're doing the album with the London Symphony Orchestra, it's over, right? They've jumped the shark.
Not always.
I know I'm being a little unfair, but
Eric Clapton did that really well, actually.
Yeah, he did, and I think Metallica did too. And so, but suffice it to say, you're not in the garage anymore.
No, that's correct. Yeah,
things are a lot different. Exactly. And then, so how did you end up managing the band, Dave?
I never managed the band officially. When they were together, it was. Yeah. I had. I was at the time I got to know Joey. They'd kind of had camps established. If you were in the Joey camp, you really didn't. You weren't really in the Johnny camp. If you were in the Dee Dee camp, you weren't in the Joey or Johnny camp.
I've read they didn't talk.
Yeah, Joey and Johnny didn't talk. Yeah.
Ever?
There's speculation that they had a conversation here or there, but they were famous for doing this thing where there'd be a third party around, like a van driver or you or me or somebody like that. And one would say to you, hey, do you want to do that second show in Holland at the end of the tour? The first show sold out and we can stay an extra day, play the second show and make some extra money. And the other one and then you would have to repeat that to the other one, even though he's standing right next to him. And so they would talk through a third party intermediary like that as strangers, and like it was perfectly normal. They just didn't acknowledge each other's physical presence or existence when they were around each other. But on stage,
how long does this happen now?
That was from about 81 through 96.
So did they ever actually end up talking to each other in the end?
I don't know. I wouldn't want to.
They might not have.
They might not have. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, if you watch End of the Century, the documentary that Michael Gramaglia did with Johnny has that last interview where he said he never spoke to him, and they always spoke through third parties, and he said, he was actually sad when he heard that Joey had died. And, the interviewer asked, why were you sad? And he goes, I don't know. Maybe it was a weakness of mine.
I remember feeling so sad hearing that.
Yeah, it is sad. It was hard,
And like how much insane creativity came from such insane dysfunction, or what sounds like insane dysfunction?
I think a lot. The one thing about those guys, in my opinion, is there was no plan B. It was like, oh, if this doesn't work out, I can fall back on that MBA I got from college or something. It would have been, the janitor or the construction worker if they were lucky, that type of thing.
And I mean, obviously they had insane critical success, and they had a fan base to be rivaled, in that it was being a Ramones fan was, and I think still is. You tell me, Dave. It certainly is for me. And whenever I see somebody wearing a Ramones T-shirt, I have an immediate kinship with them. You're part of a tribe. It's something that it's part of your identity. It's something you associate yourself with. And so to me, I can't imagine a more, I don't know what word to use, loyal fan than one who self-identifies as a fan of your band, but yet never big commercial success.
Yeah, it was interesting. I got to call Tommy right before he passed and let him know that the first record finally went gold. And
Wow.
and we got the
And gold, remind me, Dave, is how many copies?
500,000.
Holy shit.
And that was their first, success in selling records, really. And it was a long time coming, and there was, they just never had the commercial success. That was really due to them, I think, especially while they were alive,
I'm just trying to look it up. Do you know Green Day's first record, Dookie, off the top of your head, what it sold?
I don't. I know it's platinum. I don't know how many times platinum. It's sold.
Okay, there it is. Dookie was certified diamond by the recording industry for the shipment of 10 million copies.
Right. Yeah.
So you just look at it and you go, and I no disrespect to Green Day, great band, but Green Day wouldn't and couldn't exist without the Ramones. I mean, there's no way you could possibly be confused about it. I doubt they're confused about it. I'd be stunned if they're confused about it.
They would say that, I think.
They would or would not?
Would. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there is no question they stand on their shoulders. I mean, listen to the fucking record, right? How do the Ramones feel about 500,000 versus 10 million? And of course, in Green Day's case, that's just their first record. God only knows how much they've gone on to sell.
I don't think the guys in the band would begrudge anybody anything.
So they didn't think about it that way.
They were, they wanted it. They at some point accepted that they weren't going to have that success, and they became success in other ways. That their merch is a phenomenal seller. It's really the merchandise does great, and they
thank you so much for my care package, Dave.
You're welcome.
As you can see, I'm wearing one of my Dave care package T-shirts right now, proudly.
That's a rare one, actually.
I was blown away, actually. All the ones that you, through Kim, of course, who, I'm so thankful for connecting us, Kim Boland.
Yeah, Kim Boland's great.
These shirts, I mean, I'd never seen any of them before, the ones that you sent me, so thank you.
You're welcome.
The Archie one is a mind blower, too.
Yeah, we got Archie finally came around and said, let's do a Ramones comic, and we knew the band loved Archie, so it was a layup. It made perfect sense.
How cool is that they would want to do that with you guys?
Yeah, it was really great. But I think with back to what you were saying about the commercial success on radio and that type of thing, they felt that all their songs were hits. I mean, for me, listening to Ramones, it always makes me laugh because they're just such great, catchy songs. And they're just, completely minimal, and they have exactly what's required and nothing else, going on with them. But they also have such a sense of humor. The lyrics are so tongue in cheek. Used to make a living, picking a banana. I mean, it's all just it.
Beat on the brat with the baseball bat. Oh yeah.
Or even
or the Cretan hop, Dave.
Or Commando,
Oh yeah.
We had a child's. This is funny. We had a baby shirt we tried, and it was a Doc Martin boot on a baby, and the boot was like up in the air, sticking out of the stroller. Arturo put it together, and it said Ramones, Commando. First rule is be kind to mommy, right? So my son is wearing it, and he's on the swing set at the park in New York, and I'm swinging him. He's maybe 1.5 or 2, and this mom next to me goes, you really shouldn't buy bootleg merchandise. It's really, you're not supporting the band. This is really bad for Ramones. And I was like, I didn't want to tell her I had anything to do with it, of course, and she just kept going on, and I was like, well, how do you know it's bootleg merchandise? She goes, the band would never allow for that. It's a lyric change. Everybody knows the second rule is be kind to mommy. and I was like, okay, I really didn't want to go at it with her. But, people really are get in deep with it. This Upper West Side mom in Manhattan is schooling me about having the lyrics wrong on the shirt that Arturo did.
So great.
It was pretty funny. So
now I'm curious, if you put a gun to my head and said, hey, what are your two favorite music artists of all time? I think the answer for me would be very simple. It would be the Ramones and Tom Waits.
Yeah.
And there seemed to have been a special connection there. Was there one, or was it admiration from afar with the fact that they both covered each other?
It was a mutual admiration society, basically. They were fans of each other and covered each other's songs. And, the band were in San Diego, they'd invite Tom. And if he were in New York, he'd invite them. It was like that. Or in LA, he'd invite Johnny.
So there was a real kinship there.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're with a lot of bands. I mean, the old saying that the first pioneer has the arrow in his back and the second pioneer gets the town named after him.
Yeah.
That was kind of they felt kind of their way of things. But a lot of the bands that had the town named after them that followed that were just such huge fans and would, they were friendly, Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam and just a lot of bands. I met Joe Strummer at one of his last shows in Atlantic City. We went and videotaped him for a documentary piece, and he was talking about Ramones for a long time, and he said, the first time the Clash came to the States. No, the second time, I'm sorry. The second time the Clash came to the States, they were playing arenas. They were playing big places. And the agent for the Ramones called their agent and said, can the Ramones open for you? And Joe Strummer couldn't believe it. He goes, open for us? I mean, why don't we play stadiums and we'll open for them? He couldn't believe that they would not be a band selling out Madison Square Garden or, places like that on their own. It was just, he was stunned. He was like, it just wasn't fair. He also said that in that interview that, he was like, that everybody has to know that God isn't fair because he took Joey Ramone instead of Phil Collins,
Well, and it's interesting. There's a sort of a cascading effect going on in my head because I remember Joe Strummer saying no Ramones, no Clash. And I absolutely remember Sting saying no Clash, no Police. Right. And so there is this interesting domino effect. And, if I go back to something you said earlier, Dave, when the Ramones first really got going, I think, and I know this has been talked about and written about in the past, but I think it's a curious or an interesting point. When you saw Led Zeppelin or you saw Yes or you saw Rush or any of these, incredible bands, they were awesome, but you sort of said, well, I can't play the way Peter Frampton plays, and so that's awesome, and and that's the end of it, right? And but when the Ramones came to town and it was, three chords of 1, 2, 3, 4, a lot of people thought, well, shit, I could do that, right?
Right.
And that mattered, right? Because the story of the Ramones came to town and all of a sudden, ba-boom, there was 100 bands.
That's right. Absolutely. No,
I don't know if there's any band. You tell me, is there any band in rock and roll history that inspired the creation of so many other bands? I mean, maybe Elvis himself, maybe the Beatles.
Yeah, I'd say there are. I would say there are.
But I mean, they'd have to be right up there.
Yeah, and I think what the Ramones did was so brave because it really flew in the face of what was going on in a real big way. And it, and they would credit, Iggy or, Bay City Rollers, bands like that, as the bands that they looked to, that they're like, well, we're just kind of doing what they were already doing in a way also. MC5 even. you know, and when the title punk came around, they weren't really that comfortable with that mantle. They were like, wait a minute, you know, you didn't call the MC5 punk or Iggy or, you know, those other bands at that time, or the Stooges, you know. So it's interesting because they may not have been the absolute first at minimalizing, you know, and being, you know, hyper melodic and that with a very minimalistic, you know, structure. But they really got the title, and that was perhaps timing and luck, both good and bad. Ultimately good. You know, they certainly were who they were. There was no mistaking them for anybody else.
Yeah, and they were the pioneers of what, of course, became a giant new category of music, right? And the interesting thing about that is, as I look back through the history of music, many of the biggest artists are the ones that are the genre or the category designing or defining artists, right?
Yep.
You know, Bob Marley brings reggae to the world. He's the category creator of that genre of music, right?
But was he really the first?
I don't know. Probably not. I mean, often it's not,
Yeah.
right? I'd be surprised if he was. So now you've been involved with lots of bands.
I have, yeah.
And could I trouble you for a Cheap Trick story, Dave?
Let's see. I just, you know, I've always loved Cheap Trick. I grew up in Chicago. The drinking age was 18. It was, you know, we didn't have pictures on our driver's licenses. I'm 50. Our neighbor, a neighborhood friend who was a little bit older, lost his ID, and anyways, and I gave him $10, and he went down to the courthouse and got another one for 49 cents, and you know, the lady typed it out and cut it out with scissors, and he signed it, and he was on his way. So I would like take the L down to Chicago to see bands play. Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, Cheap Trick, Pez Band. There were all these great bands, and in those days, the club scene was so robust because there was nothing to do. I mean, there was really literally nothing to do. There were 3 channels, maybe 4 channels on TV. If you were lucky, you had color instead of black and white. There were, and your parents were like, "It's 9 a.m. What are you doing in the house? Go outside," you know. So, yeah, there's a hurricane. I don't care. Get out of the house, you know. So, you know, so it was a little bit more like that. Your parents were like, you know, not, you know, they were. I don't know. It was. Yeah,
I mean, when we grew up during the summer when we weren't in school, to your point, we'd leave the house at, I don't know, 8 a.m., 9 a.m., whatever, go do whatever, go to the pool, we had bikes, right? You'd ride around, you'd go into the woods and get lost and chase frogs or whatever you do. And somewhere around 8 o'clock at night during the summer, your mother would start screaming for you and you'd have to show back up and she'd have no fucking idea where you were or what you were doing all day long, right?
Nor would she ask.
Yeah.
You know, so, yeah, this whole thing of play dates or whatever didn't exist yet. So, anyway, long story short, I would go down to the bars and see bands play, and you know, I saw Aerosmith when, you know, I saw a lot of little bands that were touring that got a record deal, and a lot of bands would play their tri-state area. So you could play if they were from Rockford, so they would play Rockford, Chicago, St. Louis, Detroit, Minneapolis, and then everything in between, like Madison, Champaign, Flint, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, Milwaukee, etc. So by the time you got done playing your tri-state area, it would be like 6 weeks, and then you'd go make the circuit again. So you know, the Cheap Trick were playing Chicago maybe, I don't know, 6-8 times a year, and I'd heard about him because a guy that I was with, Northern Prairie Music was right up the street from me, which was Paul Hamer's place, and he was making guitars for this guy from Rockford. He was making these.
Hey, Dave, could you turn your email notifications off?
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
Let me do that. Sorry. So, anyway, yeah, Paul Hamer was making guitars, and so Kenny, through Northern Prairie Music, Paul would get these demo tapes of Cheap Trick, and so Kenny started getting these demo tapes, and and I heard him a few times, and we would go down and see the band play at Mother's or Thirsty Whale or places like that, the Rush Street places, and they were just unbelievable. It was like, being in a railroad tunnel, and here comes the train, and it just ran you over, and you were just floored. They were just great. I mean, they were unbelievable. It was unbelievable how great they were, and And this is before they were the bands that ultimately they became, of course. Yeah, and then when that first record came out from Cheap Trick, we knew all the songs. Daddy Should Have Stayed in High School, and all that stuff. You knew all of it. And it was the same in New York. Like Ramones would play Jersey, Connecticut, New York, and you could, doing that, quit your day job, buy a van, even afford a hotel once in a while that everybody would cram into, and have enough money to have an apartment and eat and put gas in the van and, new strings on your guitar and survive. And if you did that for 2 or 3 years, playing 200 or 300 shows a year, chances were you were probably pretty good if you did that, which both Ramones and Cheap Trick did to a certain extent. And so that by the time that you got your record deal, you had 75 or 100 songs in the can, and you had, you had a live show that was very convincing and very good. So there was this circuit to kind of work through. There was this wall to throw yourself at until you stuck.
Almost like a major league coming up through the minor leagues, right?
Exactly, yeah. And once they changed the drinking age and got really hard on 21 and over, a lot of the clubs closed, went out of business. I'd say maybe 2/3 of the bar scene in Chicago went away.
Wow, that's fascinating.
So, and I think that's why there's so many bands from that era and that time frame that, were, by the time they got a record deal, they had 100 songs. I mean, So wait, I just want to push on this. I'm one of those grumpy people who say there's not a lot of legendary new music, right? Right.
And there's certainly not a lot, and that's probably not fair, but I don't think there's a lot of legendary new rock music. And
yeah.
Did you just tell me why? Because of the drinking age change? Because by the time I'm 21, I've sort of, maybe I'm not going to go and hang out in the alternative bars and listen to bands I've never heard of who might be cool?
I think it's one of the reasons, and I think another is that there's a lot of competing entertainment now. Try to get your kid out of the house. There's 200 channels on TV, and there's the internet, and he's got his phone, and
and all the game shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's now it's like there's all this great stuff to do. When we were kids, it was like, what are we going to do? I don't know. Let's get out of here. You just had to get out.
Yeah.
And
you had to go somewhere.
It was the only way to meet girls or hang out with girls and stuff.
There was no Tinder, right? So you had to get out. Yeah,
and there were chances there'd be girls there and they'd be drinking or maybe doing Quaalude 714s or something. Anything could happen, So it was just a different environment, a different time. And so when Ramones got signed, the Seymour says they had like 60 songs. It was like, well, what do you want to record, So they picked they had a lot to choose from. And when Cheap Trick got signed, Rick had over 100 songs. And Jack Douglas, and I love the first record. It's my favorite record still.
The first Cheap Trick record.
Yeah, he's he and the label didn't feel that I Want You to Want Me was a hit. They didn't feel that Dream Police was a hit. They didn't feel that Surrender was a hit. all those songs were sitting there, and they passed on all of them and put the songs that are on that record. They thought, oh, Candy might be the big hit. But, so you just never really know, but that they were, going through that suffering process and trying so hard and, really, really doing anything they could to make it work, and then taking it out to an audience that would give them an immediate reaction like, whoa, that didn't work. Let's not do that tomorrow night. Let's change this part of the song because that part of the song worked, but the other part of the song didn't. There was a lot of that, I think, that went on with bands back in the day that, made for, working out a lot of the bugs,
They were toughened up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember some of the Beatles history, and was it in Gladwell's book too? But if you go back into the Beatles history, I mean, they're touring their time in Germany, and I mean, they were a hard working cover band and touring band, and I mean, they played a lot of shows, right?
Yeah, and this, if you ever can see, there was a Beatles documentary called The Complete Beatles that somebody doesn't like it, so it's never seen the light of day. But the BBC did this documentary, basically said the Beatles weren't very good. They were, they were playing the Cavern Club. They weren't doing very well. They weren't bringing people in. The club owner was had moved them from Thursday night to Wednesday night, and then moved them to Monday night. They were just starting to. Then they were gone after. I think Monday night's as low as you can go. I'm not sure, but anyway. And Brian Epstein, who was their manager and had recorded them, went and he found a guy in Hamburg that said, I can book them. So we need a band. It's 6 sets a day, 7 days a week, 8 months straight. They live upstairs in 2 rooms, and they have to play the background music for the strippers. And it's all the Air Force guys and the Reaper Bomb, coming by to, ogle the strippers, and they've got to play the backup music for that. So they were in there like, oh, I'm tired of playing drums. You play drums. Okay, I'll play drums. I'm tired of singing lead. You sing lead. Okay, I'll sing lead. But when they came out of that after 8 months, it was like telepathic. Like, if John's singing lead, Paul's going to take the third, George is going to take the fifth, as far as the harmonies went. They didn't really need much to do because they knew each other so well, and they'd even traded instruments and, done all that type of stuff. And then
they began to sound very similar, right? Their voices,
they were great. And Epstein was like, wow, that worked so well. I signed you up for another 5 months, and they nearly fired him. But they had to go back for another 5 months after that.
Oh,
when
wow.
they came back after that, it was like, they were like, now we will fire you for real if you make us go back. So. Anyway.
I remember that story. I didn't remember that it was that long and that they went back. Yeah. I just remember, how much they were forced to play. But the Ramones, for how, even though their music was simple, man, the band was like a chainsaw, right? Live.
Yeah.
Like incredible. It sounds like one thing.
That's right.
Right? The band doesn't sound, you don't hear separate things. It's one thing. Is that fair?
That's right. Yeah, it is. And, Johnny's downward picking was totally unique. Like nobody plays down only and never plays up with their picking. And his fingers would be bloody, They would go through the show in the dressing room. They'd go through the whole show top to bottom. And then go out and play it, especially later on, just so that it was that drilled in.
No kidding. The entire show.
Yeah.
The encore.
Yeah, everything. Yeah.
Wow. How long before they went on did they finish the rehearsal of the show backstage?
You'd have to ask Monty, but it would vary, probably within like half an hour.
Okay, so they wanted it to be close to when the show began.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, very, very tight.
Yeah, like one unit. All right, so let's go a little bit more. Can we talk maybe some about Dave?
Sure. What can I tell you about me?
Well, so how did you start sort of getting into the business of booking bands and ultimately having your own festival now?
Well, I started, I grew up in Chicago, and I really wanted to be in a band, and I wanted to be good. And so I practiced a lot and played guitar. I'd been force-fed piano as a kid because my mom was a teacher, and had played in several bands. And so we were playing, and what happened was somebody stole all our gear. So we had one of the club owners did a benefit for us, and nobody did anything. So I got, I went out and went to the radio stations and, gave away tickets. I put up flyers. I got, special guest musicians to play. And I really, really worked on promoting this show. And it ended up selling out. So we get to the club, and it holds like 500 people, and it sold out. And I went to do the money, and Kevin, who was the booker, wasn't there, but Walt, the owner, was. And so in talking to Walt, I said, "Where's Kevin?" He's like, he quit. He left me cold. He's like, you did a pretty good job here. Can you book my club for a week or two until I can, find somebody to do it? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. So that's what I did. I started booking the club, and, pretty soon, a year had gone by, and then I was on to other things. And Walt restored the Vic Theater in Chicago. So I went from, I was booking 3 places, and also 4 places actually before too long. In Chicago, and it was just, there was a lot happening at the time. Depending on where the place was, what the situation was, we would do more national stuff like Ministry, which, even though it was from Chicago, was national at that point. The Residents, Replacements, the 1,000 to 1,500 seat club stuff. We did a lot of shows in that space. Suzanne Vega, and all different genres of stuff. And then
and as an act, sorry to interrupt you, Dave, but as an act, can you make a decent living in that 1,000, 1,500 arena world or theater world?
Yeah, you can. I mean, it depends what your definition of decent is, I guess. But more so then than you can now, perhaps. And then, down to this smaller club, West End, where we had 4 bands a night, 365 days a year, similar to CBGB's. That's the hardest grind when you're doing that smaller one like that, because it's just constant. There's no break. It just keeps going.
It's so many bands, right?
It is.
Are there that many places like that still around?
No, not so much.
Yeah.
So, but about 85, I was offered a job in New York to go work for a booking agent. So I went to New York to work for this booking agency, and I was there for about a year, and I got to help with the Bad Brains Eye Against Eye tour, and Richard Thompson, and other stuff, Eric Burden and the Animals, and that type, all different types of things again.
How cool is Eric Burden?
He's awesome.
Is he as cool in person as I would hope he would be?
Yeah, no, he's just a great guy. And then,
what a voice, and so many great songs. What a songwriter.
Yeah, absolutely. But then the guy that owned the agency, one day he came in and said, I got offered to be senior vice president at William Morris. So I'm out of here. Have a nice day, everybody. And took off, And so I was kind of on my own, and that's when I, got the new music seminar job, which was part-time. But I also did other things because that was only, 4 months a year. So I would go out and tour manage bands and work as a promoter rep for different promoters around town. And then I landed a job with Ron Delsner, who's the primary promoter in New York. And that was really something else. I worked, I started the Roseland Ballroom, did a long-term deal with
You did not.
Yeah, with Larry Ginsburg.
Wow. How many legendary acts came through that club?
Many. And
thank you for doing that, Dave.
No problem. Then, Roseland had been active before then. It just had been going through a state of being derelict. Roseland actually goes back to, back in the day, Glenn Miller Orchestra would play there. That whole circuit of bands were there in the 30s and all that. So that's just a grand old lady of a room, But I got Academy going on in Times Square on 42nd Street, the Irving Plaza, and the Marquee on 21st Street. And then aside from that, I was working a lot of other shows. I did the grounds and chair crew stuff for the Stones at Shea Stadium for 6 shows, and worked Paul McCartney at the Garden, and we did all the shows at Jones Beach and Garden State Arts Center and all that. So it was really just this massive learning experience where I was just immersed in work like 20 hours a week all the time.
Was this Bill Graham?
No, that was Ron Delsner.
That was Ron Delsner. Yeah.
And then from there I got to meet Bill Graham. I was the rep for all the Bill Graham bands that came through New York. And I'm proud to say actually that I was poached by Bill. And so I went over to run his New York office, which may sound like it's a big job, but it was just really 3 of us in this Upper East Side penthouse where he had the top 3 floors as a kick-ass apartment for when he came to New York, and Winterland T-shirts was on the 2nd floor. We were on the 1st floor. So, and I did that up until Bill's passing. And at that point I was working with a band called Blues Traveler. So,
great band.
Yeah. Blues Traveler are awesome. I saw them a couple weeks ago actually. And I worked for them for 11 years, did Horde Festival.
For Blues Traveler for 11 years?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Wow, after Bill?
Yes, yeah.
Incredible.
And it was a great run. We worked really hard. The band worked really hard. That was a lot of work.
How many shows a year would they be doing on average?
Maybe 200, 250, depending.
Wow.
But we started a festival called Horde Festival.
Yeah.
And that actually rivaled Lollapalooza for 2 years. We outgrossed them in 96 and 97. And we were Tour of the Year in 96 with Polestar. And so we really had some big successes. The band sold 10 million records, got them to the point where they were selling.
Holy shit. That's huge. I didn't realize they were that big.
Yeah. We sold out the Garden, and they were really kind of on their way in a big way. And then unfortunately, Bobby Sheehan, the bass player, passed, and a lot of things changed, within the band, and I had to leave. I just wasn't comfortable, for personal reasons. I decided it was time to retire. So I stopped doing that. But a few years prior to that, I'd run into Cheap Trick again, who I'd known from, my younger days, and I started managing Cheap Trick in 1997, and that was the first thing we did, because there was we did these 3-night stands where just an idea I came up with where we just played the first 3 records. So we booked 3 nights in a city. First night was the first record. Second night was the third record. Fourth night was the third record. I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
But they played some greatest hits for the encore every night, and people loved it. And we would sell, 3-night packages. A lot of the people came to all 3 nights.
All 3 nights, yeah, sure.
And one of the people that came
and it wasn't as hard on the band from a travel perspective, right?
That, and it was an instant sellout, and everybody wanted to hear it, and everybody, so that really started this thing with the bands playing records.
That's so cool.
It was they were the first ones to do that, and that was pretty good. And then, but
and they also, I hate to interrupt you, Dave. They also, am I remembering this right? Did they do? Was it Sergeant Pepper in Vegas?
Yeah, that was later on.
Okay, because I thought that was kind of a cool idea too.
Yeah. Well, what happened is for the New York shows, which was actually Halloween, was the third night. We had a trick or treat poster for that, which was big posters for all of them. But the band were all like kind of in Kiss costumes and stuff outside of somebody's house. And their perspective is through the front door, and Robin has the bag of shit in his hand, and Rick has the lighter, and and all that. But anyway, the third night, for all 3 nights, Joey came and hung out, and he was really excited, and it was just a really good thing. Ramones and Cheap Trick had crossed paths at different times, and were friendly and friends, and so that it was just a really great hang with Joey, and that's when I kind of reconnected with him, and he called and said he had a solo record, and he was looking for different things to do with it. Cheap Trick made a recording of, the 3-night stands. We'd taken some of the recordings from it and put out a record called Music for Hangovers, which we released through a new website called Amazon to launch the Amazon.com music page. And,
no way. They launched Amazon's music page with that Cheap Trick record?
Yeah, it was the only place you could get it, and all the stores were pissed. The only place you could get this record was at Amazon, and it was $12. And anyway, we sold a ton. It was great. So Joey was impressed with that. He was like, that was a different approach, way to get attention, different, And so I started, this dialogue with him, and he was working on the record really slowly because he was sick. Anyway, so Joey passed, and when he passed, it was really, I don't know, it was sad. He was so young, and he had so much more to do, I felt, and that last record was really just a taste of what was to come.
It's such a great record.
It really is. And but I'd gotten to be really close with his mom and his brother, his family. That's his family. He had a very limited family. And so all this Ramones stuff started coming up. Like, they want this song in a movie, or there's these orders for T-shirts started coming in like massive amounts. And Charlotte was like, you got to help. I know you only signed up for this Joey stuff, but you got to help out with this Ramones stuff. And I was very cautious of it because of the relationship between Joey and Johnny. The band was originally the 4 of them. And when Tommy left, the 3 remaining members bought out Tommy's shares. Then when Dee Dee left, Joey and Johnny bought out Dee Dee's shares. So at the end, the band, the control of the band, the business parts of the band were solely controlled by Joey and Johnny.
Wow.
And even though they didn't talk really, right? So I was like, all right, I'll get involved in this. And I got involved, looking out after Joey's side of things. And I have been doing that since 1999.
So for Joey's part of the business.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Got it.
Yeah.
And that's been since 99, Dave.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And so how great is that?
I think it's been, my only regret at certain times is like the band aren't here,
Yeah.
to enjoy all that, because the success really kind of started happening after Joey died. Then they got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nod. That was, that would have been such a big deal for Joey. and they started seeing these commercial successes that they'd never seen when they were alive, as far as their music being used in films or TV commercials or things like that.
What
We tried
is there an athletic stadium in the United States anywhere that doesn't play Blitzkrieg Bop every game?
Not that I'm aware of.
When would that have started? Do you remember?
That started probably about 2003, 2004.
Yeah.
We really started working into that. And also the Knicks, you go see basketball games, so especially the Knicks, at every free throw, it's, let's go from rock and roll radio.
Right.
And
it's crazy.
And then they throw, then they make the free throw. But, yeah, so it really kind of is snuck into a lot of parts of, regular everyday culture. And a lot of people, surprisingly, don't even know, right? Like, they don't know that's the Ramones. Or there's actually people that, we made a rock and roll high school shirt that we sold through Urban Outfitters. And most of the people that bought it didn't even know it was a band. They just thought it looked cool, and it was it's iconic, so, but if that's the gateway, I'm okay with it. Cause that'll introduce them,
Yeah. I mean, the band is so iconic. And I mean, as a marketer, I look at it and go, well, clearly this was all the deliberate, intentional, long-term strategic plan of a brilliant marketing mind or minds.
Right. And
right.
Really,
I mean,
really it was 4 guys from Forest Hills in a basement.
Yeah. And I mean, so I got to ask you, where does the iconic presidential seal come from?
That was a lot of that was Arturo, but he worked with the band. That was Dee Dee's belt buckle that Dee Dee thought would look really cool on there. With the arrows on it and that. And
yeah.
they had a kind of feel about how to do it, and they liked it because Johnny was big on military. He'd gone to military school, and everything had to be in order, and have a place, and and that, and so it really does capture that in a lot of ways. It's a very it's an iconic look to it for sure.
And then what about they of course wore those incredibly awesome Scott leather jackets, right? That Springsteen has worn and Joan Jett has worn, and
or ripped jeans.
Ripped jeans.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you know where those decisions came from, or were they serendipitous, or were they very intentional?
They were intentional. I think a lot of that was Tommy at the beginning, their first manager. And, there were people, like, I'm really lucky because I get to work with and for Joey's brother, Mickey. And he was their first roadie. He is an accomplished guitar player who, knows how to read music and was taking classical lessons and that type of thing, and started teaching Joey how to play, but because of Joey's anxiety issues and OCD, at a time when OCD was not a diagnosed condition.
You were just nuts, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll speak to that kind of for a minute, just my opinion on it. But Mickey was there to kind of say, here's the root note, here's the fifth, here's the, give him a few building blocks. And because Joey really didn't have patience to put more than 2 strings on a guitar. So the only way that would come out is na 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 na, like that. And so
wouldn't the necks all warp in time though?
Yeah, it wouldn't really matter.
He didn't care.
And so it was just it's again, it kind of just leads back to, I guess, if there was no plan B, that they kind of had to make it. They really didn't. They couldn't say, okay, screw this. I'm tired of this. I'm getting out of the van and I'm going to go, work at the law office or something,
Yeah, the old Richard Gere line from Officer and a Gentleman. I have nowhere else to go.
Right. Yeah.
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 And then, so how did you end up? I mean, you're in an interesting part of the country now, given where you used to live and work, and you have a pretty iconic festival that you've been running for several years now. So how does that part play out?
We moved to Charlottesville for the family, schools, quality of life, cost of living, stability. These college towns are really great places to live because the education systems are great. Everybody cares about them. We ended up here, and I shouldn't say ended up. We came here intentionally, and it's been fantastic. I really haven't had anything to complain about at all. In New York, it's 2 hours to a real airport here to Dulles. In DC, in New York, I would spend 2 hours in the cab just getting to jail.
Right.
It's really not that much different, even the bad, quote unquote, bad parts. But so we've been here since 2008. And I'd also kind of been at a place where it's like, okay, everything's getting digitized. So as long as I have a good cell phone, broadband, good computer, and I'm near an airport, I'm fine. I can, work from where I want to work and be other places. So I'm old friends with Peter Shapiro from back in the Blues Traveler days. He owned Wetlands in New York, and that's where Blues Traveler kind of cut their teeth. They played every Monday night there for almost a year. And, before that it had been Nightingales. And so I knew Pete really well from back at that time. And we were, we'd been to a couple festivals together, and we're saying, what, we'd really like to start a festival that we'd like to go to. So we got close to doing one in upstate New York. And a friend of mine here, a neighbor, and a guy that does Festi, which is another festival, took me down to a place about half an hour away. And it was just an ideal place. And we started Lockn Festival, which is a jam band festival with some classic rock acts that we put on the bill also. And that's done well. So we're going into our 6th year next year. And it's been a lot of fun. It's what I like to do.
Now, if my memory is right, Dave, Lockn this year came right on the heels of I don't know what to call it, maybe the unrest in Charlottesville.
The Summer of Hate.
Yeah,
yeah.
I was putting it nicely. That the time when I was screaming and crying at my TV at the same time.
Yeah, I was too.
And some of the stuff I remember reading about Lockn this year afterwards were things along the lines of what a healing thing what a healing thing it was to be able to do that sort of right on the heels of this horrible thing that happened. And I'm just curious, what was it like for you, both when these horrible acts went down and then having, your baby that you work on all year round happen so shortly thereafter?
Well, it was deeply upsetting to me because one of the state troopers that was in the helicopter is somebody that had worked at Lockn, and the helicopter went down 8 houses from our house. So
holy shit!
I know. So and then and I play hockey. I'm in the older, I play for the Mid-Ice Crisis and for the Jerry Hat-Tricks.
The Mid-Ice Crisis. That's very good, Dave. I'm very impressed. As a boy who grew up in Montreal, Canada, I'm especially impressed.
And then the Jerry Hat-Tricks is the other one. But,
yeah, that one's really good too.
But he played for the Yahtzees in Richmond, so I knew him as a hockey player a little bit, and it was just really upsetting. It wasn't just what happened to Megan and that, but these 2 officers wouldn't have been there. if these people hadn't come in from out of town to do what they did. And so, and as far as happening 12 days after, we went to a lot of pains to really make sure that it was, secure. We had some online threats and stuff. So we did a very, very thorough search. We had weapons dogs at the search and things that people didn't appreciate coming in and are still kind of complaining about. But, we found some weapons. So I'm freaking glad we did it, It was of the oops, I forgot variety, but still, I don't know. It was, I was very stressed out just from the just from the thought of, just hoping and praying that nobody did anything stupid, but everybody that came seemed to feel like we really needed this. It was a good, positive, thing to happen in the area and the market. And, and I think people really enjoyed the timing of it. I didn't, but I think everybody else did.
Yeah, I can't imagine it was fun for you. But like I said, some of the stuff I read online after the show, after the festival, talked about how powerful, the healing power of music and et cetera, et cetera. So even though it was no fun, it seemed like it was a great thing for the community.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And look, it's, it's what we do. I mean, people should come together and listen to music and have a good time. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be about, and it's different in different genres of music too. I mean, at Ramones shows, actually there was this Husker Du show at the West End that really kind of summed it up for me. What we had, and I'm standing by the front door, and the Huskers are playing, and these three guys bring this other guy out, and he's got a bloody nose, and they kind of shove him to the curb, and they turn to the guy running the door, and they say, "Don't let him come back in. He was hurting people on purpose." And they went back in the club, and it was kind of like, wow, they were looking out for each other, and the dude was, I guess, he didn't ask to come back in. He just took off, but I think, there was a certain sense of community with especially we want to call them the punk rock community. They looked out after each other. They made sure they had rides. They made sure that, people were respecting each other, that, if somebody was stage diving in a nice way, that they were caught and not left to land on the floor, that type of thing, you know what I mean? It's hard to,
yeah.
There was a sense of community that was super, super strong with that crowd.
Yeah, no, I relate to it growing up in the music scene in Montreal that I grew up in. That was, had very, very similar attributes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it makes sense.
Yeah. So it's good. I think there is a lot of, look at when we're born, before we're born, the very first sense we get is sound. So that's really super powerful because, and I talked to this doctor who theorized that the reason we get it at 6 months in the womb is because we're larger, and it's important that we're upright. And as a result, there's all this subliminal and subconscious and unconscious activity that's tied to sound, like that you may or may not be aware of. Like when you go back to Montreal, you may go, "Oh, this feels like home," but you don't know why. But it could be because you're hearing robins in the background instead of starlings, or it could be just, the wind off the lake, or the trees, or the planes going by in the background, or whatever might be those combination of sounds.
Sure.
There's a lot to that. And I think for me, like I'll remember, I'll hear a song like "Oh Caroline" by Neil Diamond, and I'm right back at Jarvis Street Beach in Chicago in 1968. That song blaring out of the AM radio, Larry Luchak on WLS, just cranking that thing. And you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, it's a time capsule.
I may not be conscious that that's where I am but if I think about it, I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of got a little spring in my step because I'm, this has kind of transported me back, even though I'm not that aware of it. Or like, you go to your high school reunion, you notice that everybody is still listening to the exact same music they listened to when you left them as seniors in high school.
We all are. We are all trapped in that time capsule.
Yeah. So what I'm really hoping to do with Ramones, and I see with Ramones that I hope can happen with them, going forward, is that it's this timeless body of work. Their songs, because to me they have a timeless feel to them. It's like one of my son's favorite DVDs as a child was Charlie Chaplin. Who would ever think Charlie Chaplin? When Charlie Chaplin was around, would he ever think he'd be on DVD like 100 years later, and that some 5-year-old would be loving it and think it's great? Certainly not. So, and I think there's certain artists that kind of fit in that space that get that.
Did the Ramones ever think they'd be on a lunchbox?
They would have loved it for sure. But yeah, exactly. So my hope is that long after I'm gone, that the band is still, in that pantheon of those artists that, are in that space.
And so what an interesting role you have. I mean, in a very real way, you are a steward.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the most interesting thing about working with this band, because all the other bands I'd ever worked with before, it was, how do we get to where we're going, and how do we, and it was that. It wasn't looking after the legacy like this. And I think I'm really lucky because I think this band has made a body of work that is truly timeless. So how do you keep couching it so it remains that way? One of the things we just did was, it's been the 40th anniversary of these records. So Warner Brothers has been putting out these reissues. It was like, oh no, another reissue. But from where I sit, it's like, it's not about that. It's more about bringing it up to speed with today's technology, because there is a new mastering platform for digital. So for Warner Brothers, it makes.
Do you mean Pro Tools?
No,
or
just
what? Excuse my ignorance.
When you master a record, like Bob Ludwig or
yeah,
Greg Calvi or somebody go in and they compress it for radio. There's new formats to it. So what happened to Ramones is that the records came out, and then at a point at the turn of the century, the late 1990s, actually 2001, they remastered the first 4 records, and in 2003 they remastered the next 4 records and onward. But when they remastered it and put them out on CD, right? How do I put this? A lot of care wasn't put into it.
Yeah.
So, and now what's happened is everybody's moved from the CD format to digital, right? So you have these audio files that were really meant to be on records that sound great. If you A/B the record and the CD, the record sounds so much better. It's just, it's night and day. So that was very disappointing to everybody in the band. It's like, our record doesn't sound that good anymore. And that's the one that's out, that's everywhere. It sounds tinny. There's not a lot of bass. You don't hear very much guitar.
It's not as
robust.
Jackhammery as the band was live, right?
Yeah, or even how the record sounded.
Yeah.
If you took the 33 and you put it on the turntable, and you took the remastered CD and you put it on the CD player next to it, and you went between the two of them, you can hear it. I can hear it, and I don't have a trained ear, and it does, and the record just sounds light years better. So in doing this, we were able to get Craig Leon to go back into the studio with the original masters, and and remaster it for vinyl, remaster it for CDs, and then thirdly, and this is the most important to me right now, is remaster it for digital, because now, and we went out and we took all the files off the internet, all the old ones with the CD, and we replaced it with these digitally mastered online files. Now when you go to Spotify or Pandora or iTunes or any of them, and you listen or stream or buy or whatever you do, it sounds so much better.
And when did these get released, Dave?
The first record was released last year. We released Leave Home, was the 40th anniversary of, they were released in 1977. So Leave Home came out in June, and then Rocket to Russia is coming out next week. And then we're going to keep going. Road to Ruin is coming out the next year. We really want to get It's Alive out. Warner's isn't sure they want to do that one. And then
why not? It's such a great record.
And then I'm going to kind of leak this to you. The first time heard is that we're going to redo the Spectre record at end of the century, but we're looking to do the Ed Stasium demo versions, which Ed mixed before they were specterized, and it sounds a lot more rock than perhaps.
Because it was a little soft for the Ramones, right?
Johnny always felt that way. Joey liked it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put them both out together. What was the Beatles record they just did? It was Let It Be. They did the rough mixes before Phil Spector got them, and it just sounds more rock. There's a lot of polish on it. There's a lot of reverb. There's a lot of that
the guitars feel softer.
Yeah, and there's that whole wall of sound.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I get, we all understood what was going on. I mean, the interesting thing about the Ramones to me is, as a fan, the band could do no wrong. And so even with a record like that where, some fans thought it was too soft, it's like, well, we understood what they were trying to do. They were trying to make some money and have a hit or two.
Right. But it has rock and roll radio, rock and roll high school. It's got, it's got really good songs. The songs remain the same. Good. That's the thing about that record.
Yeah, I mean, those songs are so iconic. I mean, to your point, even people who don't know it's the Ramones know those songs.
Yeah, exactly.
Rock and roll high school. I mean, come on.
Of course. Yeah.
And so, well, that's very cool. And so, what's coming?
We're really hoping to take Rock and Roll High School to Broadway.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it didn't work out with the Cormans, so.
Huh. And so is there a plan B there, or what do you think?
We're letting them come to us with an idea. I kind of thought Pet Sematary would be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know how that relationship came about?
The band loved Stephen King, so it started with some letters, I think, from Joey.
Just love letters to Stephen King from Joey?
Yeah, basically, yeah. We're big fans of you. If there's ever anything you need us for, let us know. And he did. And
so he ends up asking them to write the song.
Yeah. Well, through his people, yeah.
Yeah, of course. And it's a great song. Pet Sematary is a great Ramones song. And the thing is, it's a Ramones song.
That's right.
Right? They didn't write like a James Bond song or something.
That's right.
It's like the cover of Spider-Man. Like Spider-Man, when you hear it, you're like, of course it's a Ramones song.
Yeah. That's right.
And any update on Lockn for next year you want to talk about?
We're working on putting the bill together right now. We'll be breaking on that at some point.
Yeah. Well, fair enough. Dave, anything else before we wrap this show?
I hope listen, hopefully I've cured anyone's insomnia. No, I don't know. I think, you know, it's important if you're pursuing your muse to really persevere until the timing and luck arrive. There's just, I can't say that's really the most important thing. And if you fail or you have failures, learn from it. I always try to hire people right after they've had a massive failure, because they have so much to prove. You're going to get your money's worth. You know what I mean? That's how I see it.
That is so great, Dave. And I mean, clearly that's what these guys did, right? They just persevered.
Absolutely, yeah.
And finally the world figured it out.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you know, it didn't happen during most of their lifetimes, but
yeah,
you know, again, you know, hoping to keep the legacy moving.
Well, I want to thank you for being super generous with your time and your life. You've led a magic rock and roll life, Dave. You're awesome. And as a super fan of the Ramones from the time I heard the first song, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being the steward of this music and this, this iconic group of guys who changed the trajectory of music forever. And so as a fan, I just can't thank you enough for caring for the Ramones the way you clearly do.
Well, we're trying. Thank you. Thanks.
And I will tell you, as a 3-time chief marketing officer of publicly traded technology companies, if for some reason you think I can help, I would do anything to help you continue that legacy. Well,
you have to have a massive failure first.
Oh, I've had more than one. The list would take a long time and many a scotch to take you through.
All right. Well, let's do that. Well, thank you.
Dave, it's really been wonderful. And I'd love to see you in person. Let me know if you're going to be anywhere in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I will let you know if I'm going to be in the Charlottesville area, because, man, I would love to buy you a beer.
Likewise. All right. Keep up the good work.
Will do. Thank you so much, Dave, and be legendary, my friend, as I know you will.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Well, hey ho, let's go. That was Dave Frey. Thank you so much again, Kim, for setting us up. Dave, thank you for your time and your sharing your inspiring story. And I could listen to stories about Dave's life and great musicians for hours. And if you love Dave Frey as much as I did, please share him on social media right now. If you have somebody in your life who's an entrepreneur, who loves music, who's a Ramones fan or whatever, send it to them right now. And also would like to tell you that Heather Clancy and I, the legendary journalist, are writing a new book called Niche Down. And it's all about how you as an individual, you as a solopreneur, or you as a small E, growth-oriented entrepreneur can, as my buddy Scott Lowry says, find your niche and get nouveau riche. So if Play Bigger was about how to design the next Google or Facebook, Niche Down is really how to do that as a individual or as a small business. If you want the free preview to Niche Down, here's what we'd ask you to do. Write a review of Legends and Losers wherever you experience podcasts, on iTunes and Stitcher, Podbean, or wherever else you do, and send us a screenshot of that review. Email it to blackhole@legendsandlosers.com. That's blackhole, all one word, @legendsandlosers.com, and we will send you the free teaser, the preview of Heather and my new book, Niche Down, which is coming out later this year. And we'd also love it if you subscribed on our new website, legendsandlosers.com. All right. We would like to thank the Lockn Festival in beautiful Arlington, Virginia, August 23rd through 26th, 2018. This year, starring Widespread Panic, Dead & Co., George Clinton, and more. Check them out at locknfestival.com. Our good friends at NetSuite. Run your business from your smartphone at netsuite.com/legends. Check them out if you want to grow your business, if you want to take advantage of modern cloud technology, netsuite.com/legends. HarperCollins Instant Classic Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. Pick up a couple hundred copies wherever you buy your legendary books. EquityDirectory.com, connecting startups to the talent and resources they need to build a legendary business. If you are in the entrepreneurial startup ecosystem, you need to be on EquityDirectory.com. OneLifeFullyLived.org, dream, plan, and live your best life. We are the nonprofit helping you get the most out of life. Check us out, OneLifeFullyLived.org. Your Seat Cushion is a flotation device, the amazing new book from our dear friend, multi-time guest, Dushka Zapata. Check it out wherever you get books. Your Seat Cushion is a flotation device. Our good friends at Verve Coffee Roasters in Santa Cruz, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Tokyo, and always at vervecoffee.com. Pursuingresults.com. They produce legendary podcasts, and they produce this one too. And speaking of podcasts we love, the Achieve Your Goals podcast with our good friend Hal Elrod. Hal's an amazing guy. He's lived an incredible life. He's the author of The Miracle Morning, and his podcast is one of the top podcasts in the world. Check it out. Achieve Your Goals podcast, wherever you get legendary podcasts. And Doctors Without Borders. You give us a donation, and we make a difference in the toughest places on planet Earth. Check out msf.org or doctorswithoutborders.org. All right, we need to remind you that this oddcast is a sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and we would love you just a little bit extra if you shared the shit out of it. We do need to remind you that all rights do remain disturbed. The KKK took my baby away. I just want to have something to do tonight. There's no stopping the cretins from hopping. Sitting here in Queens, eating refried beans, wearing all the magazines, gulping down Thorazines. Beat on the brat with a baseball bat, oh yeah. When I'm lying in my bed at night, I don't want to grow up. Chewing out a rhythm on my bubble gum, the sun is out and I want some. I want to be your boyfriend. They're forming in a straight line. They're going through a tight one. The kids are losing their minds. We're all out there having fun in the warm California sun, and I'm looking for something to believe in. All right, today our deepest apologies go out to Elizabeth Holmes, the founder and chief executive officer of Theranos. Sorry, Lizzie, we just ran out of time for you. Thanks, my legendary friends. Be legendary. We love you hanging out with us. We hope you love this episode, and we look forward to seeing you again soon on another episode of Legends and Losers.